the Scarborough School Board, not the Toronto District. And I've been a full-time speaker throughout the last, 18, 19 years. And then 5 years ago, I went back and took a master's in counseling. And so I'm a registered psychotherapist. And so I do a couple of things. I talk on issues that I think we as the church often don't like, don't want to, or don't know how to speak on. This morning we talked on mental health, which is actually why I'm sitting. I told my story of having a breakdown 13 years ago and still being unwell 13 years later. But I've learned for me, if I sit in a chair, I'm a bit calmer. So someone called me the sitting speaker recently, and I'm like, it's kind of amusing, but yes, that's me. I speak on parenting, which is this talk. I have a talk on media and technology, especially social media. I have a talk for men, a talk on marriage, which is my newest one, and a talk on dating as well. So parenting is an interesting discussion today. So for some of you, this is going to be for you at home with your own kids. For a lot of us as educators, just looking at the idea of how we can help our parents along with this conversation. And even then, going back to our churches, how do we help the parents in those environments? And so my goal is really to equip and empower us to be better parents. I am married with 2 kids, I forgot to say. My wife, Dawn, is a pediatric home care case manager with Ontario Health at Home right here in Markham. My daughter, Zoe's in her first year of law school up at Lakehead. And my son, Ben, is taking his master's in counseling. And I always put up a picture of our favorite family member, which is Phoebe, who's awesome. Okay. We have 40 minutes to cover a lot of stuff, and I would just give you a couple of ground rules. Number 1 is this: please be a good learner. We as Christians are often wonderful listeners. We smile, we nod, we say amen, but are we good learners? Do we take what we learn in a session, in a teaching moment, a preaching moment, and apply it to our lives? So be a good learner. Find your light bulbs, because each of you are coming from different paradigms of your life. What can you pull out of this for whatever you need to put it into? Number 3 is have opinions. This might sound weird, but I would rather you have a different opinion than me than have no opinion at all. When the Bible says iron sharpens iron, I like discourse. I say everything I say with an open hand. If you think I'm wrong, come and talk to me. Maybe don't yell it out in the middle of the talk. Come and talk to me, send me a message. My talks are always changing and growing. Number 4, there is no shame, especially if you're a parent and we walk through parenting things and you're like, oh no, I did some things maybe I shouldn't have. This is not a talk about shame and condemnation. And in the last talk, I used the quote from Maya Angelou: do the best you can until you know better, and when you know better, do better. And lastly, there is hope. We live in a fear-based society, and everywhere I go, there's, everything's bad. All these kids are bad. Universities are bad. And it's like there's good kids doing good things everywhere. So none of this it's not hopeless. So first off, how did I get to a talk called Navigating Everything? All my talks now are whatever the topic, navigating everything, but this was the first. I'm speaking at an event somewhere, I think it's on mental health, and I finish speaking, and a father walks up and he says, I've got a question for you. I'm like, great. How do I talk to my daughter about sex? Wonderful question. I wish more parents would ask that. I went to answer, and he interrupted me and said, wait, by the way, she hates me. Go ahead. And I said, sorry? And he goes, no, forget about that. How do I talk to her about sex? And I said, no, forget about sex. What do you mean she hates you? Because that's everything. If you're a parent and your kid hates you, you do not have the influence to speak into that kid's life. I think that's very similar to us in education. If you don't have that relationship with our kids, we don't have the right to speak into their lives on many other things as well. On the drive home, I realized, excuse me, my voice is low. I had 15 clients this week, and this is my 3rd day speaking in a row, so my voice is slowly going down. But I realized I had nothing on how to be good parents, and just that foundation of parents, which is why I began to create this talk. I also realized I have 35 minutes left, and so I want to make sure you know there's so much content online that I offer. You don't need to click on all these QR codes. You're welcome to. Everything comes off my website. My website has 1,600 links on it, all categorized by whatever topic, like parenting, we're talking about. The middle one is my Amazon shop. If you click on my website, social media at the top, my Amazon A is there. And you see where it says control the controllables on my website? If you just wait, that thing will scroll across and you'll find the Google Doc for this talk. So I began to read books on parenting and became very, very overwhelmed. Number 1 largest category on Amazon is parenting. 77,000 books with around 20 a week coming out. And I read books from two differing, very smart people with differing ideologies, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm not that smart. And it's confusing. My wife and I, after a lot of reading and a lot of discussion, said, we think there's 4 foundations of parenting that no one talked to us about. There's many more, but these are the ones that we were like, I wish someone had just addressed this with us. Number 1 is, what on earth even is parenting? Like, what's the goalpost, right? What are you trying to do? If we don't know what it is, how do you know what to actually do? Number 2 is time. What does spending time with our kids look like? One research that came out from in Australia said the average Australian father spends 6 minutes of uninterrupted time with their children per week. Now, all statistics are wrong. They're all wrong. They're just a snapshot of a time and a place, but a research study says that. So somewhere these studies are coming out. Number 3, communication. What does good quality communication look like? And then discipline. And discipline will carry over into school conversations as well. But I would put forth that we in the church spend way too much time on punishment and so little time on teaching. The actual cornerstone of discipline is how do we teach kids to not have that happen again, not punish them for what they did, even though there's lots of nuance and discussion there. And as a faith-based person, I put on the bottom, Christian faith. You know, our Christian faith should touch all aspects of our lives. Our worldviews affect our values affect our actions. So what is parenting? I posted online and I was reading books and I found some great kind of comments. Chuck Swindoll says, the job of a parent is to help his or her children come to know themselves, grow to like themselves, and find satisfaction in being themselves. Love it. Paul Tripp, author, pastor, here's the core mission of parents: to raise up children who approach everything in their lives as disciples of Jesus. Ron Morris, who I know has been to this conference in the past, some of you might have heard of him, wonderful discussion on discipline from an education standpoint. We want kids to be respectful, responsible, courteous, and considerate. Hundreds of people, though, wrote me and said, the goal of parenting is to raise happy kids, to which I would say I disagree. Happy is an emotion. Happy is not the rubric of whether you've been successful or not. And then I read a book from Ted Cunningham. He says that they will not be with me forever, so I prepare them accordingly. This is what I call in my life stop quotes. They're quotes that I stop reading and I sit back in my chair and I'm like, Like there's such weight to this discussion. When my kids were young, they will not be with me forever in that. I now have 2 post-grad, I have grad school children. It's a very, very different world in grade 3 and grade 1. So as a Christian, I began to look at scripture verses in parenting and was kind of shocked. George Barna says, if you've sought spiritual guidance in parenting, you might have been surprised to discover how little instruction God gives us in this regard. There's 2 slides I get hate mail for this talk. This is the first. I'll tell you the second in a few minutes. But people write me and say, how dare you tell me the Bible doesn't talk about parenting? And I write back, you do know the word parenting is 100 years old. It didn't exist before that. Neither did the word Tesla, or Big Macs, or many, many other things. It doesn't mean we can't look at what the Bible says, but parenting as a verb, as an action, is a newer kind of thing. We also forget, in biblical times, kids were married at 12 and a half to 14. Any middle school teachers here? Those are your kids. Picture that, right? And so, but I do think this. The Bible talks about who we're to be as people, and this should flow over into your parenting. If we become who the Bible calls us to be, I think we will probably be good parents. Now, children are throughout the Bible. In Deuteronomy, it says, teach them to your children. Now, the word is actually not the word teach. The actual language would be the word inscribe, and there's an emphasis carving into a rock, carving into it with a knife. There's a really emphatic emphasis. Psalm 22:6. I have to be honest, this verse really worried me. Every single parenting book from a Christian perspective came from this paradigm that Proverbs are promises. The book of Proverbs is the book of wisdom. It's the book of adages. It's not determinism. And I can't tell you how many hundreds of parents have come up to me after a talk crying and saying, my church has told me I guess I haven't trained up a child the way he should go because they've made free will choices and gone off this way or that way. Now, I do think most of the time good parents have good kids, but not always. Colossians and Exodus are very authoritarian, do what I tell you. And I'm just going to leave Proverbs 13 right now, the spare the rod hates the child conversation. So parenting stages, When kids are younger, there's more physical exhaustion. As they get older, there's more mental or emotional exhaustion. One woman just shouted out and said, "I'm just tired all the time." I'm like, fair. That's a fair sentence. Some of you might know the name Andy Stanley. Andy's wife, Sandra, wrote a blog where she used these 4 kind of parenting stages, and I really like it. Discipline, training, coaching, and friendship. Do not get hung up on words, though. You discipline throughout, but different. You train throughout, but different. You're always a coach, and you're always a friend. If you ever see those things that come around our Christian community, like you're not a friend, you're a parent, please just click delete. You also have to enjoy your family. You have to enjoy kids, even as educators. We have to have fun with the kids we teach, right? It has to be more than just us nagging and telling what to do. And kids go through these at different kind of rates. If you've ever seen a kid or you have a kid in rep anything, my son was a rep baseball player, my daughter was a gymnast and a dancer. Rep kids go through these a little quicker. Why? I think it's the increase in socialization when they're out at practices 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week at different things. But a disciplined 6-year-old is not an incomplete 7-year-old, right? They all kind of flow through these things differently. And if you search parenting anything, you will soon be served parenting styles. Now, I'm going to encourage you to follow lots of people. One would be the woman Allison Schaefer. If you don't know her, you should. She's an Adlerin therapist, if you know Adlerin therapy, but she's the resident mom on almost every TV show in Toronto, global city. But she's from the city, Schaefer, S-C-H-A-F-E-R, but she says, you'll find there's a lot less parenting styles than names to describe them. Before I give you a few, Tim Elmore said this, from the 90s, adults began to believe that our world was less safe than ever and kids needed oversight or direction at all times. He went on to say that he thinks 4 things have happened. I wonder if you would agree. Number 1, kids began feeling that they're entitled to special perks because we said that they're special. I'm 54. If I came in first place, I got a big trophy. If I came in last, I got a ribbon. Today, the first place trophy and the last place trophy is the same size. There's a soccer club in Toronto that doesn't keep score. Do you know who keeps score? Everyone, like literally everyone, coaches and parents. And we do win and lose in life. It's okay and to learn those things. Number 2, kids began to feel unsafe, afraid, and even paranoid because of their parents' behavior. Kids began believing that they were fragile and cannot handle adversity, I would add in, because of their parents' behavior. And 4, kids began embracing the narrative that the world is full of evil people who could harm them. Where do they learn that? Because of their parents' behavior. Parenting is the cornerstone of so much. And then we look at parenting styles. I have 2 pages. I am not going through all of these. The stars are the ones we should be. The blue are the ones we talk about a lot. In the dead center, I want my kids to be Christ followers. Right at the very top in the left is attachment parenting. This is it. The greater attachment you have with your kids, the less discipline you will have. Conscious parenting, and so there's names like Tina Bryson, Dr. Dan Siegel, people, again, you should follow. They wrote a book called The Power of Showing Up, and they say if kids feel, and I like this, seen, safe, and soothed, they'll feel secure. Seen, safe, soothed, they'll feel secure. It's the idea of secure attachment. And I think so much of this translates into the classroom. Now, in the dead center at the top is intensive parenting. Most of us don't know that. Helicopter parenting, now you're on board. You've seen this. And if you've been in education a while, you've seen the shift and change of helicopter parents. My favorite is actually Black Hawk parenting. Black Hawk is a military helicopter where parents swoop in, we blow everything up, and then we fly away. On the bottom are 3 that I put together, gentle, positive, and peaceful. Now, if you read parenting books, gentle parenting has now been hijacked, and we kind of have to give what we mean by that. So my wife and I were gentle parents, meaning we weren't authoritarian, we weren't harsh and other things. Today, gentle parenting, for some people, has this new kind of thought, which is you let kids do whatever they want. This is where language matters. So you have to understand what a word even means. The big thing of the day, though, top left, over-functioning, over-parenting. This is fear-based parenting. The more parents we over-function, the more our kids will under-function. And we are seeing an incredible shift in the functioning of children. It used to be a grade 10 and 11 or 12 was more like a college or university student. Now we're looking at a grade 9, 10, 11 is almost like a middle school student. We're just seeing this kind of shoving down of all of that. So with parenting styles, anyone confused? You're like, well, what do I do? So if you've ever taken a psychology class, you will have seen this. There's only 4 parenting styles. Everything I just said can be plotted on this graph. There's support and warmth on one axis, control, demand, influence, use whatever terminology you want on the bottom. Peer-reviewed research is very clear. There is one parenting style that works and the others don't. Authoritative parenting, where you love a lot and you push them along a lot. It's that balance of those two things which is important. Now, if you look at the root of the word authoritative, it's the word authority. It's that, remember that father who said, my kid hates me? Like, it's that influence you need for this. So with over-functioning, I would just say this, don't over-parent. We do life with kids, not for kids. And I say this probably the same in the classroom. If kids can do things for themselves, we let them do things. We do life for when they're little, and then with, and then we let them do life. Tim Elmore wrote a great book, and he just says, over-functioning in parenting simply means doing too much for our children, removing common struggles they may experience in their day. Julie Lythcott-Hames says, and this is kind of the cornerstone, we've stopped preparing kids and we've started protecting kids. She was the Dean of Admissions for Stanford University in the US, and she just said the change is coming in. She called kids today not quite fully formed humans as young adults. I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is usually a game I play, which is you might be over-parenting if you drive your kids to school to cut their food into pieces, or so you drive to your kids to school to cut their food into pieces at lunch for a grade 2. Teacher around the corner from my house. You send your kids to camp or retreat with 2 phones, one to give to the camp counselor and then one to hide to give you what? Proof of life at the end of each day. My son was a director at Camp Minneoe 2 years ago, and this was very normal. You go on a job interview with your child. Author Leonard Sachs says Canadian statistics are 1 in 8. Like, I can't all stats are wrong, but this means this is actually becoming normal. A father in Chicago calls his daughter at UCLA to wake her up and give her her agenda for the day. Not quite fully formed. Always making your kids lunch. This is the second thing I get hate mail for. But here's what I just say. If kids can't show responsibility with little things like making lunch, how will they ever show responsibility with big things? Like cell phones and iPads that have cameras and bullying and sexting, and the list goes on. So it begins with the little. They get up for school on their own. They can make their own lunch. We get them involved in things. We call kids teachers to argue marks, as opposed to equipping our kids to come and speak to you. You might have marked my paper wrong. Do you mind re-looking at it? All of this is fear-based parenting. And what we've started to do is speed up our kids' early development, and then we put the brakes on later in life. The movies, the music, the things, if you're a kindergarten teacher, you know the things that kids are seeing is so beyond what we used to. But then you look at a grade 11 and 12 and you're like, it's interesting, it's the opposite. You're seeing, markers we used to see for older kids not there. Jean Twenge says, adolescence is now an extension of childhood rather than the beginning of adulthood. There are some leaders in this kind of speaking. She's one of them. Now, I'm not going to go through this, but the purple are parenting and the brown are more media. But the changes of our parenting styles is creating dramatic shifts in society. Again, I'm in my 50s. In my day, 96 to 98% of us got our licenses by the time we were 18. The vast majority, the day we turned 16. Most recent research in Ontario was 42% of 18-year-olds have their licenses. And every time I speak to young adults without licenses and we chat, here's what I hear. Well, we live in the city, or we drive a big van. And I'm like, when did a big van become the marker of not getting a license? Even if you live downtown Toronto, you should get your license. One day you will want to rent a car or go to a conference or do something. But it's the parents' fears that become the kids' fears. I'm not going to walk through this. I will say there's an interesting growth that I'm seeing, and I don't know if we would all agree, but a growth of purposelessness with young men. The later high school, college, university, and beyond, it's something that the failure to launch that used to be a movie years ago, we're seeing this as therapists, we're seeing it in education. So parenting matters. And I just put the main thoughts. Authoritative, we love a lot and push a lot. We don't overfunction. We do life with, not for. And I like the thought of we're always coaches. We're not playing the game of life. We're coaching them how to do it, just like I would coach my son how to play baseball. And if you're looking for books, these are all on the website, but we've talked about the first and the third. Hold On to Your Kids by Gordon Neufeld and Dr. Gabor Mate is one of my favorites. I'm just not using a quote from it. Dr. Karen's Guide for the Teen Years I read when my kids were 8 and 9, and the last one is Free-Range Kids, kind of like free-range chickens. Mother in Winnipeg called Child Protective Services because a grade 6 kid drove his bike home from school alone, and they opened a case. I drove my bike 2 kilometers to and from school in senior kindergarten, right? We now live in the safest world ever, but the fear, right? The fear has grown so much, and it's usually because news cycles, something happens anywhere in the world, and we see it on City Pulse, Global, whatever. 3 left. Greatest gift we can give our kid is time, and I would put a big argument, maybe the greatest gift we can give a kid is failure, and someone's going to shout out Jesus, and I would say yes. We're just talking about something a little bit different right now. I'm a big fan of the marbles jar. I kind of put this back on Psalm 90, verse 12, which says, teach us to number our days that we might get a heart of wisdom. But the marbles jar analogy is this: the day you have a baby, you have 936 weeks. We call it 936 marbles until they graduate grade 12. Roughly they're 18. Now, this is not perfect unless you have a kid born June 25th or whatever the last day of school is. But if every Sunday night you took a marble out and looked at it and went, that's it. Like, that marble is done. My hanging out with my kid, my doing something, prayer time, going to church, the list of things. If this was a few years ago and this was on a day which was one of my kids' birthdays, now it's a daytime event, I still might have said yes, but if it was an evening, I'd probably say I can't. Because through high school and elementary school, I protected their birthdays, because the moment they're away from school, my daughter's in Lakehead. I'm not driving 17 hours to go have a birthday dinner. Like, we will go up at some point, but you know what I mean? Like, it's different. So parenting stages, I would just say, when I talk about the marbles analogy, for those of us who are parents, I see our shoulders we begin to pre-grieve as our kids get bigger. And I call this a marbles analogy with a twist. The day your kids graduate, dump out whatever marbles are left, and then every time you put anything into the marbles jar, I want you to, anytime you put anything into your kids' lives, you hang out, you go out for a movie, whatever, anything, you put another marble back in the jar. A woman once said to me, what do I do when my marble jar is filled again? And I'm just like, I love you, that's awesome. Like, dump it out and start again. But time matters. Morning time, drive time, meal time. I say bedtime for all stages except for teenagers. Like, if you're tucking in a 16-year-old, you're over-functioning. Can we just acknowledge that? I've had at least 4 emails, people disagreeing with that you should be able to tuck in a 16-year-old. So, main thoughts, marbles. There's an app called the Parent Q, C-U-E, by Fuller University. It has a blog and a podcast on it, but they do the marbles thing for you as you sign in, and it's free, which is quite good. Mealtime, if I had to remember one thing today, meals. I am shocked how many times after I do this talk, someone says, do you want to know the most revolutionary thing about your talk? I'm like, that's a big word. Yeah. And they're like, eating dinner together. I have people who tell me, we never eat together, maybe Christmas and Thanksgiving. Recently, father says, we have 3 teens. Everyone grabs their own food. They go to their rooms, and my wife and I go to different rooms because we watch different shows. Columbia University did 3 years of peer-reviewed research. If you eat 3 dinners a week together, every negative thing that you don't want to happen goes down. And it's not your chicken, right? It is this. It's talking and community and asking good questions and being just being the support. In our house, we always said it's us against the world. And we live that out, usually at the dinner table. Scheduling. This is kind of when they're young, they're always with you. Then there's the driving years, I call it, when you're driving them to things, and then they get their licenses. Then we switch to family nights. And the rocks analogy, I do this in my media talk, but you've probably seen this, the jars of life. If not, Google it. Big rocks, pebbles, or little rocks and sand. Big rocks go in first. Faith, family, school, exercise, nutrition, all these things. Little rocks could be vacuuming, grocery shopping, hobbies. Little rocks is all television, all screens, right? Doesn't matter if we're talking Blue Jays or TikTok or whatever. Big rocks go in first, then smaller rocks, then sand. A couple of good books here. Grown-Up's Guide to Teenage Humans. Fair Play is something I take all my clients through, my couples when they come through. This is just on the emotional labor, predominantly of women. And I just think we need to get better at this for our children, and we got to get better at this in our houses. As a couples therapist, it's the #1 thing that we address. So we're kind of moving quickly. Now we're doing the right parenting styles. Now we're spending time with our kids. By the way, time is being present. So especially for people in the school world, it is stressful. There's lots of stuff. When you were at home with whoever, family, fully present, phone down, look people in the eyes. If you're a parent, if a kid comes in the room, you pause the TV, you close your laptop. Why we do not speak to each other with tech in between us. My wife and I have a rule. We will not say anything until the technology's away. But once we're doing those things, now are we doing the right communication? Do our kids only think they're loved when they get good grades? Do our kids only think they're loved if they're compliant to the rules? By the way, you do not want a compliant child, because a compliant child to you will be compliant to a bully online who asks them to take their clothes off or any other thousands of things that could go wrong in life. So emotional regulation is a big one. I think this is a great thing for anyone to get. So the Gottman Institute is they're the marriage people in the world. If you click on that and the parenting and then click the emotions coaching course, it's a video series to help our kids regulate and to help us. It's probably the best thing I've seen. It's like $79 American. That's like 4,000 Canadian or whatever with the exchange. It's about $100, and I don't make any money off this. I just think it's a really, really great package. By the way, if you're in a relationship, Gottman has great content on that. Gary Chapman, in his book, When Sorry Isn't Enough, talks about the idea, well, what happens if your relationship is broken? I think I'm sorry is a really great thing. This is good for us as educators, right? Working with kids, I'm sorry is okay to say. If it's still broken, maybe more time or better communication. I have 2 kids. My son and I have shared sports. When Tiger came back to the PGA Tour a few years ago, we texted every single hole. My son and I texted every baseball game that went on with the Jays. My daughter was always a gymnast and a dancer. I always threatened to coach her dance class. But she and I have had to work on our relationship. We both love iced coffee, so whenever we have one, we send a pic of it to the other. It doesn't even matter where it is. Just, here's a McDonald's iced coffee. It means I love you. We both love certain foods. We watch a show, her and I only together. We work on our relationship. Does not mean I love her any less, but we have to work on the connections we have. What if it's still broken? Can we just normalize counseling? Counseling's not just for the broken, but if you're broken, it's also really good. You can go to counseling to say, I want to be a better father, a husband, I want to engage with my kids more, or whatever it might be. But are we actually listening? I'm blown away how many times kids say to me, I told my whoever in life, and I was told, you're fine. I'm speaking at a church. One of my favorite things is to speak on mental health for a Sunday morning service. And I finished speaking, and one of the worship leaders, young 14, 15-year-old girl, came down weeping, hands shaking, and she just talked about she was thinking of suicide and her anxiety and depression, and she's told her dad, and her dad just says, I'm going to pray for you, and then never talks about it again, and she's addressed it, and he ignores her. In this moment, the lead pastor came over. I'm going out for lunch with him and his family, I just didn't know that was his daughter. And he was shocked as she's weeping on stage. And now I've known him a while. I had the privilege of saying, you got 5 minutes? I'm going to take a quote out of context from Martin Luther King Jr., but he says, there comes a time when silence is betrayal. When kids say, I'm not okay, it means I'm not okay. We might not have any idea in the world what to do. That's also okay. And you might just need to say, if it's your own kid, I love you so much. We'll get through this together. I need some help. I'm going to go talk to a counselor or a leader or pastor or another adult that I know, and you need me, I'm here. And then we journey with them through these things. I hear from kids, they feel abandoned and isolated and invisible in their own homes. And do we realize they're being watched? We're being watched. I was at a pastor's conference, and I used a line one of my profs said to me, which is, the church is answering questions that no one's even asking. I've never gotten that out of my head. Pastor said to me, he polled his entire congregation, and he said, you get 2 services, whatever you want me to speak on. They came back with mental health and pornography. He texted me the next day and said, so when are you speaking on mental health and pornography? Mental health, fine. You want me to speak on pornography for a Sunday morning service? And he said, yes. So I did. The whole church spoke age and stage appropriate on a topic. It was really kind of moving to see. I'm on my way home, and this is through email, but an 18-year-old guy writes to me. He's like, hey, if I ever struggle with porn, can I talk to you? I'm like, yeah, sure. Why wouldn't you talk to your dad, the executive pastor of the church that just brought me in? He said, my dad got in the car after your talk, and the first words out of his mouth, it's me, my mom, and my 2 teen brothers and sisters. The first words out of his mouth were, what kind of stupid person gets addicted to pornography? And the 18-year-old said, in that moment, my dad told me he's not a safe person to talk to about anything ever again for the rest of my life. Like just your influence. First off, as a pastor, where is the grace and mercy? But like, we are the church. Welcome. You're struggling and journeying, welcome, right? Come in. We will help you walk through these things. But this is where, if a teen gets pregnant at an elementary school down the road and you say in your home, what kind of stupid teen, like you hear that, right? Your kid will now say, well, you're not a safe person. I told my kids if they ever get drunk and high at a party, they did not. But I said, if you ever need a ride home, I will pick you up any place, anytime, anywhere. It's not permission. It's just, listen, I am here for you. Don't drive home with someone who's drunk. Don't do something if you make a bad decision. Communication matters. Do our kids know, to quote Robert Munch, they're loved forever and always? That no matter what my kids ever did in life, they knew I would love them forever. I might be disappointed, but my love never changes. You want your kids running to you, not from you. Do your kids run, like this is this, if something happens, do they run to your parent, not don't tell my parents, right? And if kids can't tell their parents, they tell you. This is where I remember as a teacher, right? We become these secondary parents where kids come and share the things that they don't feel that they can share at home. Communication, listening. I love John Maxwell who says, listen 80% of the time, talk 20% of the time. My favorite line as a therapist to tell people is, tell me more about that. Just parrot that every time. Tell me more about that. The 5 love languages, I sort of like this, but I sort of don't. You need to do all of them, no matter what are your great things you like or don't. But do you know your kids' love languages? Even in education, right? You can see the kids who need the words of affirmation or the other different things. And I'm a big fan of family meetings. When my kids were 8 and 7, we began our first family meeting. We had one up until this summer. We have one every August. We're a Christian family. What does that mean? Do you need new running shoes? Do you want to go away? When will we do it? All of these kinds of things. We work as a family together. A couple books. When I talked about the growth of the purposelessness of men, I put up this Failure to Launch book because the answers to this, I think we can be, it's like reverse engineering. We can come back to elementary school and begin, like the answers are very clear. Lagging life skills. Resilience is low due to undiagnosed anxiety and depression, overfunctioning in adults. There's some great things that we can do. Lastly, discipline. Now, Ron Morris is on the bottom there. He says, discipline is about teaching children to behave properly, not punishing them for behaving badly. My favorite book is by Ross Greene called The Explosive Child. Challenging behavior occurs when the demands being placed upon a child outstrip the skills he or she has to respond adaptively to these demands. His famous line is just this: kids do well if they can. It's that simple. Kids do well if they can. And if they can't, how do we teach them to be able to? This is where I think, like, I'm a big fan of the term Occam's razor. The simplest answer is usually the answer. And this is the kind of thought I like. So I'm not going to walk through a lot of this, but we need a relationship with our kids for influence. We need clear, agreed on expectations and consequences. And lastly, I would put forth we spend way too much time talking about punishment. I'm listening to a sermon and the pastor talks about we should be spanking once a week. So parents are looking for times to spank. I'll just be honest, I'm a non-spanking camp, and I just think that's where we land. I think I've never met a professor in my life who's ever actually said that those verses are actually about corporal punishment, but you and me can have a differing opinion on something and still be brothers and sisters in Christ. This is not top-tier theology. But I would just say, as a therapist, going through my training in my master's degree, they talked about Christian homes and spanking. And as a therapist, I'm inundated with people talking about how those things went way too far. It's Ron Morris who says it's interesting how kids get spankings at 8 at night, not 8 in the morning, which means it's about us and not them. Anyways, I'm just putting that out there. That's a whole discussion. But Ron says, you're going to have to decide what you're all about. Are you here to give children the punishment and consequences they deserve for failure or the training and support they need for success? By the way, when I say I'm against spanking, I'm not against discipline. Those aren't like, I discipline, but just not with spanking, right? There's other things that we did. If you don't know the name Sheila Ray Gregoire, I think she's a really great person to follow. She speaks on sex and marriage, but she's also waded in often to these kinds of conversations. She has 2 wonderful blogs. They're off my website on other things that we can do. Some of them are just simple. My son, someone said to me once, I grounded my grade 10 because he didn't wear a coat to school. My son in grade 10 left It's minus 15 now. He's got no coat on. I'm like, you don't have, and I'm like, oh, he's in grade 10. Have a good day. See you. He comes home. First words out of his mouth were, why didn't you tell me to wear a coat? Now, I'll be honest. If he gives me that attitude, I'm going to say, I'm your dad. I'm going to give you a do-over for that. Do-overs is what I often did. It's a great thing for kids. I'm going to give you a do-over. And he'd often go, you're right. But I let him go this time. I said, because you're in grade 10. And he smiled and went, yep. Never talked about that again. And he wore a coat whenever he wants. One of my favorite things with this is just the idea that some parents fail to realize that it's the job of every child to tear down their parents' fences and build their own. You want your kid to love Jesus because they love Jesus, not you. You want your kid to go to bed in good time and get good night's sleeps because they realize it's important for their life. You want them to eat good, healthy food because they realize how, you see how they need to tear down and then build their own fences. I always think of the idea of our kids are growing up and make an assumption, if we have kids, that they're going to go away to college, university, the workplace, police college, whatever. Because then you have to have them equipped, and you do not start the summer of grade 12 equipping a kid to live on their own. My daughter went to Western, my son went to Queens. At that moment, they had to know everything on how to deal with dating and sex and pornography and food and what to do when you're sick and talking to professors and public transit and banking, and the list goes on. So discipline, and we're just glancing over this. These are just the things we talked about. At the very end, I really like the quote, connection before correction. I don't know who coined this, but it's in lots of parenting books. And I've given you a whole list here. I do like raising emotionally strong boys. I think it works for girls as well. And there's lots of boundaries books. Some of you read the book Boundaries on its own. There's actually, as a couples therapist, one called Boundaries in Marriage. It's like a darker, I think it's a brown color. Very, very good. Bottom right is Honey, I Wrecked the Kids by Allison Schaefer, another really great one. So there's many other things other than this, but my wife and I were just like, we wish people had really helped us with these things. Once you have a relationship and you're spending time and you're communicating and all of these things, now you have to deal with everything. Sex, porn, mental health, media, technology use, just the list goes on. But the greater relationship you have with your kids, the easier this becomes. So online, I have lots of resources. If your church or your school has Right Now Media, my Parenting Talk This is in a small group video series. My talk, Men Navigating Everything, is on there as well. And I said in the first talk, my wife's always like, this is a great talk for women. And I'm like, hon, I'm never doing a talk called Women Navigating Everything by Brett Ullman, like the mansplaining that would happen in an hour and a half. It's still good content. My media talk is now out as a small group thing that people can use for schools, for personal life, or churches. And my new talk on marriage is coming out. It's been filmed. We're just waiting for it to be edited. Knowing this is just a moment, my website has 1,600 links off of it. And there's a take-home button as well. So if you just wait for those panels to move, there'll be my media one and my parent one. People you should follow, things like just lists of stuff. It's all online. I do encourage you to follow people who talk about the issues that you're dealing with, whether at home or at school, so that when you open any social media platform, you are just served with great content. When I open almost anything right now, I'm still getting marriage content. Sermons and quotes and little clips, because I spent 2 years researching marriage, so my YouTube wall is just marriage. And you can see how it's not all bad. By the way, if you want to know what you do online, just open up TikTok and scroll through 40 videos. I'm at a talk, it was a Christian school, and a father stood up in the Q&A. It was my last day of Q&A. He said, why is TikTok? It just offers everyone women in bikinis. I said, you know it's an algorithm, right? He goes, what's an algorithm? And I'm like, oh, please. I said, it shows you more of what you're looking at, so maybe stop looking at that. It was the same night, Christian school, mom stood up, talked about her son's porn addiction, and in my head I'm praying, oh God, please don't have it be the kid. And then she hugged the kid beside her. And I'm just like, I pictured outing her son in front of 450 parents and students for his porn addiction, and I'm just like, I'm not doing Q&A anymore. I do Q&A now at a booth, or you can email me or talk, but public Q&A, anyways, another whole conversation. Few slides left and we're done. I spent about 3 years creating and it's not a book, it's 7 books in one. Realizing a lot of people don't read anymore. There are 7 chapters in parenting, 6 on the things we just talked about, 1 on family discipleship itself, and then 9 mini books talking about every different thing we should address in our homes. And these books can be read by our kids, those 9 last little mini things. They're middle school and above. And there's a study guide, and I read my own book on Audible. People always ask how they can help. You can pray. We're fundraising. There's a sheet on my table. And if you can use me at your school, your camp, your church, your conference, your whatever, I travel and speak. So where do you start? As we close, and I know I'm 1 minute late, we close with looking at, I say it 2 ways. I close the same way almost every time. The book, The Power of Moments, says that your life, your faith, your parenting, your education today, whatever, is built in moments. So today is just meant to be a moment to push you along. But John Maxwell says, when any time you hear someone teaching, choose one thing. So what is one thing I said in my talk? And you're like, I can do that. Whether it's for your school, whether it's for your home. But then he says the hardest thing, you have 3 days to do something about it. And so I would say between now and Monday, whatever that one thing is, try to implement that, write something down, book a counselor. There's a million things it could be. If you want to chat, I'm going to go to my booth now. If you want to book, I answer all my own emails. So if you have a question, you can send me an email later. But I know you have one more plenary session left, and then I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for coming out. Have a good day. Bye.